"You weren't listed because you weren't really part of his life," my cousin said, folding the obituary in front of me. Guests glanced away, pretending not to hear. I stared at the printed lie. Then the estate attorney arrived. "I'm Emily Harper. I'm 33 years old, and I work as a hospice nurse. My days are spent caring for strangers at their most vulnerable moments, holding hands through final breaths, managing pain nobody else wants to witness. My relationship with my late grandfather was quiet, steady, built on weekly visits and small acts of care. While my relatives chased promotions and country club memberships, I sat with him every Tuesday evening, organizing his medications and listening to stories about the war he survived and the wife he lost. The family viewed me as insignificant because I chose caregiving over corporate success. To them, I was wasting my potential on work that didn't come with status or impressive salary numbers. I live modestly in a small apartment with second-hand furniture. I avoid conflict, shaped by years of being overlooked at Thanksgiving dinners and summer barbecues, where my cousins dominated every conversation with tales of their achievements. My aunt controls family decisions and finances, always has. Despite appearances, my grandfather trusted my judgment. He confided in me privately about things he'd never share at family gatherings. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. I had his confidence, his recorded wishes, and responsibilities no one else accepted. What they dismissed as weakness was actually preparation. If you've been overlooked or written out of your family's narrative, hit that subscribe button. Share your stories in the comments about being dismissed despite showing up when it mattered most. This is for caregivers and quiet family members who carry unseen burdens. Being underestimated often hides strength they never see coming. Click like or hype if you believe presence matters more than status. The memorial service was held at Riverside Chapel. The smell of white roses filled the room, cloying and artificial. I walked in wearing the only black dress I owned, expecting to see my grandfather honored properly. Instead, I found myself staring at a printed obituary that erased me completely. My name wasn't there, not in the list of grandchildren, not anywhere. My aunt stood near the guest book, greeting arrivals with practiced grace. "Only active family were listed," she said loud enough for others to hear when someone asked. "We didn't want to confuse people with distant relations." Guests whispered. I stood alone near the back, humiliated. The reception followed in the adjacent hall. A slideshow played on loop, displaying decades of family photos. I watched myself appear in early pictures, then gradually disappear. Photos I remembered clearly now showed me cropped out, cut from the frame. When I tried to place a framed photo of my grandfather and me from last Christmas on the memory table, my cousin Devin removed it. "We're keeping things consistent," he said without meeting my eyes. My aunt tapped a glass, commanding attention. "I'll be handling grandfather's estate," she announced. "Emily has no involvement in these matters." I asked to review his final wishes. "You're being emotional," she said, dismissing me with a wave. An older guest, someone who'd known my grandfather from his veterans group, approached my aunt. "Why isn't the primary caregiver mentioned anywhere?" Tension rippled through the room. My aunt's face hardened. "Emily only appeared at the very end," she said loudly. "We were there for years." The lie hung in the air. Then the estate attorney walked through the door, briefcase in hand, scanning the room. His eyes found me. "Miss Harper," he said clearly, "I need to speak with you privately." The family fell silent, shock written across their faces. My aunt wasted no time spreading her version of events. Within hours, relatives who'd barely spoken to me in years were calling each other. Emily abandoned the family, she told them. Now she's circling for money. I heard this third hand from a cousin who still had some decency. The family group chat, one I'd never been added to, exploded with activity. Screenshots eventually made their way to me. They were discussing how to divide heirlooms, debating who deserved my grandfather's military medals, his watch collection, the antique desk he'd restored himself. My name appeared once. "What about Emily?" someone asked. "She gets nothing," my aunt replied. "She wasn't involved." The third betrayal cut deepest. Scrolling through an estate sale website 3 days after the funeral, I found my grandfather's belongings listed for public auction. The wooden chess set I'd played with him every visit, the blanket I'd bought to keep him warm during his final winter, the framed photos from his Navy service that I'd helped him organize and preserve, all of it listed with starting bids, available to strangers. At a family dinner I wasn't invited to, but heard about later, my cousins mocked my profession. "Hospice work isn't a real career," Devin said. "It's basically just sitting around watching people die." They laughed. I felt isolated, adrift in a family that had written me out of existence. But I didn't confront them. Instead, I started documenting everything, every conversation, every statement, every transaction I could find public record of. I requested probate records through official channels, paying the small fee with my own money. The records showed irregularities, asset transfers initiated just days before my grandfather's death, when he was sedated and barely conscious, property deeds signed with shaky signatures that didn't match his usual writing, bank accounts drained systematically in the final week. I kept my findings private, choosing documentation over argument. I photographed everything. I recorded dates and times. I built a timeline that told the truth they were trying to bury. Then I scheduled a formal estate review through legal channels, filing the paperwork quietly while they celebrated their anticipated inheritance. What they didn't know was I had recorded everything that mattered. As a hospice nurse, I kept detailed medication logs and visit notes for medical accuracy. Every dose of morphine, every blood pressure reading, every conversation about pain levels and comfort measures. Those logs included dates and times, proving my presence wasn't occasional but constant. I possessed audio messages from my grandfather, recordings he'd sent to my phone during periods when he felt strong enough to use technology. In several, he expressed concern about financial pressure from relatives. "Your aunt keeps pushing me to sign things," he'd said in one message, his voice tired. "She says it's for my own good, but I don't understand half of what she's asking." I had time-stamped care logs proving I was present daily during his final months. Not just present, but active, managing his care, coordinating with doctors, ensuring he had dignity and comfort. I'd saved text messages where my aunt pressured him about property decisions. "Dad, we need to move quickly on the house," one read. "The market is perfect right now." He'd forward it to me with a single question mark, confused and anxious. I wasn't preparing to fight emotionally. Emotions wouldn't win this battle. I was preparing to present documented truth that couldn't be dismissed or rewritten. I compiled everything into a folder I titled Care Timeline. Inside were recordings, medical notes, financial discrepancies I'd discovered, and correspondence that revealed the pressure he'd faced. I knew facts would outweigh family narratives. They could tell stories about who was present and who mattered. I had proof. I waited for the right moment to reveal them, understanding that timing would be everything. Mr. Dalton had been the family lawyer for 40 years. He'd drafted my grandparents' first wills, handled property transfers, witnessed decades of family dynamics. He contacted me 4 days after the funeral, his voice careful and measured on the phone. "Miss Harper, I need to inform you of some irregularities." We met at a coffee shop, away from family eyes. He revealed that my aunt had attempted to submit an outdated will version, one drafted 15 years earlier, that left everything split evenly among her and her children. "Your grandfather updated his estate 6 months ago," Mr. Dalton said. "The new will is very different." He advised me to remain silent and allow the formal reading to proceed. "Trust the process," he said. Truth has a way of emerging in legal settings. Meanwhile, the family's confidence grew into arrogance. My cousin posted on social media about upcoming renovations to the family house. My aunt discussed selling my grandfather's car, already negotiating with potential buyers. Devin boasted to friends online about his inheritance, talking about investments and vacation plans funded by money he hadn't yet received. The aunt even scheduled a celebratory dinner at an expensive restaurant before the official will reading, inviting the whole family except me. I heard about it through the same decent cousin who'd warned me about the group chat. I wasn't invited, but the menu selections and wine choices were discussed extensively online. I attended my own quiet dinner that night, eating takeout in my apartment, reviewing my documentation one final time. Emily attended the celebration after all, arriving late with a bottle of wine and a calm smile. They couldn't exclude me from a restaurant open to the public. I sat at the bar, observing their arrogance, watching them toast to their future wealth. They didn't notice me. They were too absorbed in their certainty. Tension built in me, not from anger but from anticipation. They believed I'd been permanently erased. Mr. Dalton scheduled the official estate reading for the following Tuesday, sending formal notices that couldn't be ignored. The notifications surprised everyone. "Why do we need a formal reading?" my aunt asked him over the phone, her voice carrying across the restaurant. "Everything is already settled." The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and leather furniture. My family gathered in the conference room, filling chairs around a long mahogany table. Afternoon sunlight filtered through partially closed blinds, casting stripes across the surface. They expected confirmation of their control, validation of the narrative they'd constructed. My aunt sat at the head of the table, positioning herself as the family matriarch. She'd brought a copy of the outdated will, sliding it across to Mr. Dalton with confidence. "I believe this is the document we're here to discuss," she said, dismissive toward me sitting quietly in the corner. Devin smirked. My other cousins checked their phones, already bored. Mr. Dalton adjusted his reading glasses. "Actually, I have a newer will to present, legally binding and properly witnessed." The room fell silent. He began reading. The language was formal, dated 6 months prior, signed by my grandfather with 2 witnesses present. "I hereby name Emily Harper as the primary beneficiary of my estate." My aunt's face drained of color. Mr. Dalton continued. The estate included the house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio my grandfather had built over decades, decision authority over all assets, full control of distribution. The will cited specific reasons: Emily's caregiving, her presence during his decline, her trustworthiness and compassion. "She alone showed me dignity in my final days," the will stated in my grandfather's words. Mr. Dalton wasn't finished. He produced evidence of attempted coercion by my aunt, financial documents showing her pressure tactics, emails she'd sent pushing property sales, bank records showing suspicious transfers. I opened my folder then, the care timeline I'd prepared. I presented care logs showing my daily presence, audio messages where my grandfather expressed confusion and pressure, medical documentation proving I'd managed his comfort when no one else would, text messages showing my aunt's manipulation. My voice was calm as I explained each piece of evidence. Relatives attempted to argue. My aunt stood, her chair scraping loudly. "This is ridiculous. She manipulated him." Mr. Dalton held up his hand. "Any contest of this will would trigger a full financial audit. I'd advise careful consideration." Power shifted across that table like a physical force. My aunt realized contesting meant exposing everything she'd done. Her misconduct would become public record. Legal consequences would follow. I spoke then, my voice steady. I didn't seek revenge. I sought acknowledgment of the truth. That's all grandfather wanted too. The aunt was left speechless. The reading concluded with formal documentation signed and witnessed. They filed out in silence. I took legal possession of the estate within 2 weeks. My first action was halting all unauthorized sales, retrieving items still listed online, restoring what could be restored. Relatives distanced themselves from my aunt immediately, calling me privately to express how they'd been misled, how they hadn't known the full story. The family fractured under the weight of exposed truth. Some stopped speaking entirely. Others formed new alliances based on who'd known what and when. I restored my grandfather's home exactly as he'd kept it. His books remained on their shelves, his chess set returned to its table, his photos hung in their proper places. I donated a significant portion of the estate to hospice care in his honor, funding programs that supported families through end-of-life transitions. The obituary was corrected publicly, a revised version published acknowledging my role as his primary caregiver during his final year. When relatives reached out seeking reconciliation, I declined conversations that lacked accountability. I reflected often on the difference between being present and being recognized, understanding now that my grandfather had ensured both would ultimately align. My silence throughout their accusations had allowed truth to surface without distortion, without my emotions clouding the facts. Being erased on paper doesn't erase the truth you lived. If your family ever tried to erase your role or rewrite your story, you know how deep that cut goes. Share your experience in the comments and tell us how you stood your ground when they tried to make you disappear. Subscribe to join a community that values truth over appearances, where documentation matters more than manipulation. Your voice deserves to be recorded, not erased from the narrative. Click Hype to help this story reach others who need to hear it. Thank you for watching. If my story touched you, a like would mean the world to me. To help others find this story, click Hype. I always read the comments, so feel free to share a piece of your story with us.